The Soul Leveling Season 2 finale left us off at chapter 111, and before I get into it, they did skip quite a few things in that finale that are extremely important to the plot, and I'm assuming they'll incorporate it into Season 3, so I'll just explain those things as they come up. Here we are in the Red Gate, and Sung Jinwoo has finally made it to the final boss. They don't really explain what he is, but he gives Centaur Reptile Hybrid. Final clash begins, and Sung Jinwoo's army per usual is having little to no trouble. Finally get to the boss, and Beru is the first one to land a blow. As you can see, he rips off his right arm. Side note, I've already read a little bit ahead, not gonna lie, Beru is definitely my favorite shadow. Igris comes right behind him and swipes the legs, which brings the giant down to his knees. Your boy Tuss used gravity acceleration to pin him down completely. Since this is a red gate and this is technically a special event, Jinwoo tries to press the monster for information, but he was pretty much shut down before he can get anything out of him, and Sung Jinwoo assumed the system interfered again. For completing the dungeon, he received a black key with a description that he normally wouldn't be able to read, but since he leveled up to 100 in Jeju Island, he now meets the requirements to read things like this. He finds out that this is the key to the Cartenon temple, which is the temple from the very first episode of Solo Leveling. However, before he can use it to open the gate, there's a wait period of 417 hours. This key will basically take him back to where everything started and give him a chance to find the answers to what the system is and why he was chosen. You feel this sense of excitement from Sung Jinwoo that he gets to go back to where this all started, except this time he's much stronger and much more experienced. He says to himself that this was planned by a higher being all along, then just wait cause he'll be there soon. Point of view switches back to the Monarch of Frost, which if you can remember from the anime, he's on the search for fragments of brilliant light, whatever that fucking means. And apparently he still hasn't found one yet. Suddenly a gate opens and another monarch named Yogamund appears. He comes to let the other monarch know that things are about to go down in the land of the east, most likely referring to Korea. His words exactly were they plan on releasing the Legia, whatever that is, we don't know yet, south of that location, which is where he's headed. Frost Monarch is basically like, I know we're not talking about the same land in the east where the Shadow Monarch resides. So it sounds like he's kind of worried that Sung Jinwoo's presence might affect their plans, but Yogamund says as long as the architect carries out his assignment, there shouldn't be a problem. He adds on that another reason they're targeting that area is that it's been confirmed that the greatest fragment of brilliant light resides there. So the Frost Monarch is like, alright, bet. Now on to more pressing matters, it seems like they were both lured to the location they're at. And out of nowhere, a hooded man appears asking them if by land in the east they're referring to Korea. When you get a closer look at this mysterious man, he does look a lot like Sung Il-won, which is Sung Jinwoo's father. Frost Monarch opens the gate and is like, yeah, I'm not about to engage with you again, but catch us if you can. But before he could hop in the gate, Sung Il-won was able to catch him and now they're engaged in a clash. But unfortunately, we don't get to see it because there is a point of view switch. After the raid on the Red Gate, Jinwoo stops back by the office and Jinho was in there stressed the fuck out. While Jinwoo was battling gate beasts, Jinho was battling internet trolls. Bro was there all day clapping back at haters and responding to all the complaints on Sung Jinwoo. Jinwoo picked up on it. You know, he's not a man of many words, but he was like, thank you so much for all your hard work. Also, here's a big old bag of treasure for us to start our guild. Let's get to it. Now, Jinho was like, alright, now that we got the money, first and foremost, what are we gonna call ourselves? Suggested the Sung Yo Guild, which basically combines their last names. Even though the Yo Sung Guild sounds a little bit better, he knows he can't put his name before Sung Jinwoo's. Jinwoo already had a name in mind since we know he's great at picking names, and that name is Solo Players Guild, which is such a terrible name. Jinho thought he was joking, but we all know Sung Jinwoo doesn't joke. It's also the problem of them needing another employee. In order to be recognized as a legitimate guild, you need to have at least 2 founding members and 1 additional person. But before they could get too deep into this whole name thing, there was a knock at the door and neither of them were expecting a guest, so they had no clues to who it was. Much to their surprise, it's Miss Fine Shit herself, Hae-in. What's even more surprising is she's there to sign up for their guild. Jinwoo is completely skeptical. Why would an S-rank hunter of her caliber, who's making great money where she's at, want to come work for a guild that has absolutely no money to offer her? It's like, did Mr. Go put you up to this? Did you get kicked out of your guild? Cause I'm gonna let you know right now, we ain't got no money. And on top of that, she's still under contract with her guild, which means they'd have to pay to break her contract. And again, he ain't got it. Hae said, nah, I'm good, I'm paped up, I'll cover my own contract. So Jinwoo, still taken aback, asks again, why do you want to join the Solo Players Guild? On the outside he looks serious, but deep down inside, this man is completely confused. Then he starts to notice her heart rate elevated, she's avoiding contact, she's looking a little bit, flushed in the face. As if she's trying to keep her cool, but deep down inside slowly losing her shit. We get to see inside of Hae-in's brain for a second. She thinks if he knows why she wants to join the guild, she'll sound insane. Then we see this montage of every moment they've ever shared together. Starting with when she caught handyman Sung Jinwoo sneaking into that gate. It was the first time she realized she was attracted to Sung Jinwoo's scent. And then we see when she woke up and Mr. Go is explaining how he saved her at Jeju Island. Although she was technically unconscious during the rest of the Jeju Island raid, she still could kind of feel what was going on and it felt like it was a dream. But she knew deep down inside he had saved her. Then we the reader got the real answer as to why she was there. She thought to herself, I want you by my side until I draw my last breath. At this point, it's taking her entire being not to just pour out her feelings to this man. Jinwoo was kind of aloof, but also at the same time, I feel like he has a slight feeling as to what's going on. Still think she's up to something, but I think he's slowly coming off of the skepticism and a little bit more like, okay, what's really going on here? This time he tries a different approach. He tells her there's an entrance exam you must pass in order to join our guild. The exam is she must defeat one of his shadows, and not just any shadow. She must defeat the strongest shadow he's able to summon. So he's basically trying to let Shorty down gently by putting her in a situation he knows she can't win in. Hae-in ain't no host. She said, let's get to it. In order to join the guild, Hae-in has to defeat Sung Jinwoo's strongest soldier. She asks him when this exam is supposed to take place, and he says, we're gonna do this shit right now. They decide to do it at the Hunter Association Gymnasium. Now the only problem with that is they're pretty far away from that location. There's always shadow exchange for Sung Jinwoo, but he's never used it with another person. So he decides to use this as a test to see if it's even possible. Right as Hae-in is about to walk out the door, Sung Jinwoo grabs her face to chest and initiates shadow exchange. Much to his surprise, it actually worked. Based on the way it's drawn, I don't think he needed to be that close, but I mean, shoot or shoot. Since he's able to use shadow exchange on multiple people, he surmises that it works just like a gate does. The entrance is formed somewhere beneath his feet, and the exit is at the designated destination wherever the shadow is that he's exchanging with. They made it to the gymnasium, but the only problem is Hae-in doesn't have her weapon of choice. Jinwoo got jokes. He was like, oh, you mean that pickaxe, referring to when they ran into each other in that red gate. But since they're technically at the Hunter Association's HQ, there is a huge armory for her to pick any weapon of her choice. Shorty is not playing no games. She went and found herself the biggest long sword she could possibly find. I mean, that thing is almost as tall as she is. So now that she has her weapon of choice, all that's left is for Sung Jinwoo to summon his strongest shadow. As he begins to summon said shadow, you see Igris pop up from behind him. Now we know, and Sung Jinwoo knows, that at this point his strongest shadow is technically Beru. He felt like having her fight Beru would be a little bit too traumatic and distasteful, so he went with Igris instead. And he told her this is his strongest swordsman. Boy, Jinwoo sneaky. Chae asks how the winner will be decided, how's this whole thing gonna go? And Jinwoo just says, the fight will go on until either you destroy my summoned beast or surrender. Hae-in is like, bet, let's run it. Before they begin, Sung Jinwoo has Hae-in turn around while he summons the Demon King's longsword and gives it to Igris. It's funny because I was just glazing how big Hae-in's sword is, and Igris is like twice that size. As soon as he gets the go ahead, Igris launches this massive attack. You know my girl Chae is quick. She sidesteps that thing easy. 2 seconds in, Jinwoo was already glazing her. She's fast just as he expected, and an ordinary person would have died if Igris even grazed them with that attack. We all know for certain there's nothing ordinary about Hae-in. Not only did she parry the attack, but she returned one and kind of pushed Igris back just a little bit. At this point, the energy they're exerting is shaking up the complex to the part where Mr. Go is starting to notice. He has one of his assistants go through the camera logs and see that Sung Jinwoo and Hae-in had entered the building a little bit earlier. First he's like, wait, that's weird, when the two of them link up? But then it started to click, all the different moments he saw them together, all the time Hae-in asked about Sung Jinwoo. This is when he earns real brownie points for me as a character. He calls the security team and tells them to shut the cameras off for the rest of the day and let them have their space. W wingman moment right there. The point of view cuts back to the fight and we see Hae-in knock Igris' ass into a wall. This one surprised me a little bit because if you would have asked me before the fight who's stronger between Igris and Hae-in, or at least the shadow version of Igris, I know more will come out later that he's strong as fuck, I would assume Shadow Igris. Now Hae-in starts talking a little spicy. She was like, you told me you were going to summon your strongest shadow soldier and he's not here, so summon him here right now. And Sung Jinwoo's taken aback a little bit because she's clearly referring to Beru, but he's like, how would she know about Beru? Chae responds that on top of seeing the beast in person, she also watched all the footage from the Jeju Island raid. She's well aware that Beru is now an employee of Sung Jinwoo. While Sung Jinwoo is shocked, he's a warrior himself, so he understands, and you start to see a shadow move behind him as Beru rises from the darkness. Even though Sung Jinwoo agreed to summon Beru, he is a little bit worried. He explains that although shadows do become a little bit weaker once they're extracted, Beru was born and designed to be a human-killing machine. And if you remember in the anime, when he extracted the Ant Queen, the ants under his control began to listen and respond to her. So he's worried there's a possibility Beru could lose control. Before the match begins, he gives Beru the order to defeat her without hurting her. No Beru, he's basically like, yes daddy, whatever you say daddy. Out of nowhere, bro starts yelling at the top of his lungs. Like, I think it was his way of trying to intimidate her, but the shriek was so loud and so powerful that it literally was destroying the light fixtures, glass, everything in the building. Gungo He is gonna be pissed when he finds out about this one. He readies himself for battle by pulling out those long ass claws we saw in this fight versus Sung Jinwoo. And Jinwoo was basically like, nah, we not doing that. Put them hoes away. I told you if you hurt her, I'm gonna make life hard for you. At this point, the match had technically started, so while Jinwoo was scolding Beru, Hae-in was like, nah, this is my chance, I'm about to attack. The exact instant she thought that, Beru appeared behind her just like he did in Jeju Island. Last time, he nearly knocked her ass out the arena. This time, she was ready for him. She was not letting herself fall for the same trick twice. She turned around and swung on his ass. Without flinching, without moving a muscle, Beru caught the sword with 2 fingers. Although Beru technically had to open the counter, and I don't know if she would have been able to do anything about it, the last thing he wanted to do was go against his master's order and accidentally hurt her, so instead, he decided to try to intimidate her. He hoped that she would naturally lose the will to fight if he showed her how much more powerful he is than her. Instead of counterattacking, he pulls her face close and yells from the pit of his being. Side note, I'm not gonna lie, looking at this panel, I wonder how Shadow Bear smell. Not a real body, so is it just like wind or I don't know, y'all let me know. At this point, Jinwoo can already see the writing on the wall, and he was like, look, this match is over. It's obvious you're not up to par. He asked her, are you satisfied now? Again, Jinwoo was trying to end this whole fiasco as quickly as possible because he knows Beru is built different. He might be able to speak, he might have intellect, but at the end of the day, he is a killing machine at heart. At the same time, he's allowing this to happen because he trusts Hae-in has a good reason for why she's doing this. But he's really nervous that this could take a wrong turn real quick. Now, while all this is happening, Hae-in is staring Beru down. She got that Saiyan pride for real, she ain't ready to back down from nothing. The fact that she was staring him down offended Beru because he sees her as a prey and he's the predator. So the fact that the prey has the nerve to stare the predator down like the predator is the prey pissed him the fuck off. It was almost as if a flip switched in Beru's mind. He lunged at Hae-in full speed, parried the attack, and prepared to launch her named attack skill sword dance, hoping she can end this all in one strike, gambling all her mana on it. He knows that if she fucks this up, it's over. He lands a direct headshot on Beru called Sword of Light. And as a reader, you're like, yeah, go Hae-in, you got this. And then you see Sung Jinwoo is freaking out like, no, and you're like, oh shit. Then you look at Beru and the aura around him that flipped that switch in his brain has now been ripped off the wall. And side note, my bad, I know I said it was a headshot earlier, it was definitely more of like a chest spleen shot. And his innate sense that tells him to annihilate any enemy in his way kicked in, with that enemy being Hae-in. And bro started seeing red. He pulled the claws out and everything. He was not playing. Sung Jinwoo yelled stop multiple times, but Beru wasn't hearing none of that. He wanted Shorty's head. Just as he was about to rip her neck off her shoulders, Sung Jinwoo had to physically intervene and calm him down. Once Beru came to his senses, he got back on his knees and was like, my bad, daddy. I'm so sorry, daddy. I'll never do it again, daddy. Sung Jinwoo turned to Hae-in and was like, why are you pushing yourself so hard? There's no need for you to go to these lengths. What's going on? What is the reason you're doing this? Tell me your why. And for a brief instance, Sung Jinwoo dropped the aloof MC trope and got really real with her. Hae-in, are you doing all this because you're interested in me? Hae-in responds, blushing ear to ear, I think so. So the point of view switches to the FBH, the Federal Bureau of Hunters, which is basically like the American version of the Hunters Association. To explain who these people are and what's going on, I have to go back a little bit because the anime skipped over the scene. I'm sure they're going to come back to it in some way, shape, or form because it's really important. Before Jinwoo ventures into the gate at the end of season 2, the FBH tries to recruit him. This guy is the deputy director of the FBH and he offers Sung Jinwoo the opportunity to enhance his abilities. Someone in their organization is able to enhance the abilities of S-rank hunters. And of course, this immediately piques Sung Jinwoo's interest. The deputy director takes Sung Jinwoo to meet Miss Norma Selner, who is the person who has these abilities. And the kicker is, she's actually able to do it multiple times. This is how they think they're gonna rope Sung Jinwoo in. Most hunters are thirsty for power, so they offer him one free enhancement thinking he's gonna come back for more. This is pretty much how they recruited Hwang Dong-soo. So Sung Jinwoo accepts the free trial, but things don't go the way they expect. She goes to enhance his power, something crazy happens. First, she's swallowed into an abyss of pitch black darkness, and then she suddenly sees a dark figure staring back at her. This completely freaks her out to the point where they thought Sung Jinwoo did something to her and they drew their firearms. Now, of course, the deputy director was like, y'all, what are y'all doing? This is Sung Jinwoo. Them guns ain't gonna do shit for y'all. De-escalated the situation and sent Mr. Woo on his way. And he asked Miss Norma what happened, when she responded, he's a king and a powerful one at that. And when she touched his inner being to enhance his ability, something stared back at her, and it wasn't Sung Jinwoo, it was more like an infinite darkness within him. And while she was still struggling to understand the encounter herself, her biggest takeaway is that Sung Jinwoo's powers are limitless. So that's what was skipped in the anime, and now Miss Norma and the deputy director are reporting back to the actual director of the FBH. He read the reports, but he wants to hear what happened from Miss Norma directly. First, they started by explaining that he is a king, that most people with awakened abilities draw their power from a place called the other side. That connection between the person and the other side is what she can sense and enhance. And normally when people are categorized as kings, when she looks into their being, she sees them as a bright orb of light. But with Sung Jinwoo, however, there was no connection to the other side, and when she looked into his eyes, all she saw was darkness staring back at her. With that being said, she made sure to let him know that that doesn't necessarily mean Sung Jinwoo is good or bad, she's just telling where his powers originate. Unlike every other hunter, Sung Jinwoo's power does not come from a connection with the other side. He draws his power from within his own being, which means theoretically there's no limit to his abilities. After hearing her account, the director decides to take them on a field trip to basement level 24, which is basically like our version of Area 51. As he's walking them down to level 24, he tells them the story of Camus the Dragon, also known as the Inextinguishable Flame. Now, this calamity was the first ever dungeon break to happen, and it wreaked havoc across the United States. It single-handedly took out hundreds of the United States top-ranked hunters, and when they finally defeated it, they found this runestone in Camus's corpse. The interesting thing is, this runestone can only be activated by a national-level mage-type hunter, which is something that hasn't been seen yet until Sung Jinwoo. Basically, since Miss Norma's enhancement ability is no longer an effective bargaining chip to get Sung Jinwoo to join them, Plan B is to see if Sung Jinwoo will be interested in the runestone from the corpse of a giant dragon. The point of view switches to Sung Jinwoo, who is in the bathroom taking himself into account. He says that since his reawakening, he's gotten stronger, grown a few inches, and gotten in better shape. But is he really all that now? He goes basically in the mirror trying to figure out if he finds shit or not. He even goes and asks his sister if he looks good, and she's like, bro, get the fuck out my face. Ken tells her that he plans on forming a guild, and she asks him what the name is going to be. He tells her solo player 1, she tells him that's ass, how about this? She suggests that he names it the Ahjin Guild, which is going forward in Chinese and also her name spelled backwards. Honestly, me personally, I like this much better than solo player 1. Point of view then switches again to Hae-in, who was in bed at the crib freaking the fuck out because she told her crush that she got a crush on him. Although she feels a little bit crazy for feeling the way she does, she's trying to convince herself that it's natural because he did save her life, even if he technically used Min's powers to do so. And all of a sudden, mentioning Min unlocked a memory of when he brought her back from the brink of death. And from her perspective, it was like the essence of his being was pulling back the essence of her being from total darkness. And she also remembered that Min had a message for her to deliver to Sung Jinwoo, and that message being, he needs to be careful of the powers that lie within him. The next chapter begins with Park Jong-soo, the guildmaster of the Knights Guild, discussing a gate that just popped up in their jurisdiction. Although it's not an S-rank gate, it's an extremely high difficulty A-rank gate. Since the Knights Guild doesn't have any S-rank hunters, they're worried that they don't have the manpower to clear the gate, which is a huge problem for them because the gate is smack dab in the middle of their jurisdiction. And since it's not an S-rank gate, if they were to give it up to another guild, they will look kind of weak. One of the members suggests the idea of, instead of collaborating with another guild, how about they collaborate with an individual instead? With that individual, of course, being Sung Jinwoo, who just announced to his team that they're going with the name the Ahjin Guild. Now, when a major guild takes on a dungeon, usually the S-rank hunter gets about 10% of the profit. But since Sung Jinwoo's services are such a hot ticket commodity, they offer 20% out the gate. But my boy Sung Jinwoo was like, nah, how about 50? Since he's in the process of creating his own deal, on paper, they want this arrangement to be treated like a guild-to-guild transaction, which means 50-50 splits of the profits. At this point, the Knights Guild's hands are pretty tied, so they're like, alright, whatever we gotta do, let's do it. But since the gate's already been open for a while, they have to start this raid by tomorrow at the latest. The gate is a few hours away in Busan, so they offer to give Sung Jinwoo a ride, but he's like, nah, I actually got plans tonight, I'll see y'all tomorrow. And come to find out, those plans are actually a dinner date with his mother. So the next day comes and the Knights Guild is all set up and ready to take on this gate. The only thing they're waiting on, of course, is Mr. Sung Jinwoo, who's running a little bit late, but thank God he has his handy dandy shadow exchange and he places a shadow on one of the Knights Guild's members. Point of view then switches to two of Jinah's classmates. They're in the process of cleaning out old classrooms until they stumble upon a blue gate. All of a sudden, the gate begins to make strange noise. You can see cracks appearing. And then, out of nowhere, a green arm reaches out and grabs one of the students by the head and crushes it. And then one by one, you start to see these green figures that look a lot like the red orcs that Sung Jinwoo fought earlier in season 2. Apparently, there's a lot more where they came from. One of the green orcs says, I'll start the hunting first, you go and get our brothers, tell them pull up on us. Suddenly, more and more green orcs begin coming out the portal and attacking the students. They say their goal is to take over the castle, and by castle they're referring to Jinah's school. The point of view then switches back to the Knights Guild. Sung Jinwoo is finally pulled up to the gate and he's marveling at how many A-rank hunters they have. As far as Korean guilds go, they actually have more A-rank hunters than most, they just don't have any S-rankers. And of course, at this point, Sung Jinwoo is a bona fide celebrity, so everybody's wondering if he's gonna lead the raid. In fact, they're expecting him to. Park Jong-soo, the guild master of the Knights Guild, comes to the front of the line. He's like, hey, I'm gonna be leading this. Sung Jinwoo's just gonna watch our backs. Which disappoints everybody, but hey, he's the leader and he makes the rules. Now that the plans and formations are in place, it's time to enter the gate. Point of view then switches back to Jinah's school, and one of the students is hiding in the bathroom on the phone with the Hunters Association. Alerted them of the perilous situation that's going on in the school, but it doesn't seem like they have somebody that they can readily send right this second. At this point, a good number of students were able to make it out the building. About half of them were still trapped inside various points of the building, and the orcs were blocking off all the exits. With, of course, one of those students being Jinah, the sister of Jinwoo. Green orcs begin to notice that something's up with Jinah. Compared to the rest of the humans, she has this slight glow, and there's also this overwhelming presence next to her. They don't know what to make of that, so they do what any orc would do, which is try to smash it. Just as the first one almost reaches Jinah, shadow guards that Jinwoo placed on her a while ago spring into action, and out you see the red orcs. Them motherfuckers get busy. I mean, bro literally punched the one that attacked Jinah through the roof of the building. If you don't remember, the 3 orcs that are guarding her were the generals of Calgargan. They're not weak by any means. In fact, as a group effort, the Knights Guild are actually able to take them down on their own. The problem is, the 2-headed ogre actually has another name it goes by. They're also referred to as gravekeepers because if you encounter them too early in a gate, that means 9 times out of 10 you'll be encountering an undead army pretty soon. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Now this is how they looked when they first appeared to the Knights Guild. However, when they got too close, they stopped and started staggering around and kind of started stumbling backwards a little bit, almost as if they were scared of something. It was to the point where even Jong So was like, it almost looks like they're being chased by something. Almost as if the closer Jinwoo got, the farther they wanted to back away. But almost in an instant, everything went to shit. Because out of nowhere, Jinwoo started feeling this sense that something is wrong. He sensed that the shadows he placed on his sister were on the move, and the only reason that would happen is if she was in danger. Jinwoo tells Jong-soo that something came up and he has to leave immediately. Jong-soo starts immediately panicking. He's like, bro, you know we can't make it through this dungeon without you. We will literally die if you leave right now. Jinwoo was like, alright, I'm gonna call somebody who's just as reliable as me and everything's gonna be okay. And behind him, you slowly see Beru crawl from his shadow. And everybody starts freaking out again. They're like, bro, that's the ant from the Jeju Island raid that killed literally everybody we sent at him. Jinwoo gives him the order to protect the humans and slaughter the rest. Knights Guild are still kind of freaking out. They're like, dog, we have to raid with this thing? They start begging Jinwoo, don't just leave us with this monster. I guess in a way to make them feel better, he summons 20 of the ant soldiers to work with Beru and tells them everything's gonna be okay, let Beru handle it. Then checks to see how much time he has left on the Shadow Exchange because remember, he used it to get to the Blue Gate. According to the timer, he has 1 hour, 42 minutes, and 16 seconds, and that's not gonna work. Bro starts hauling ass back to the entrance of the gate, and on the way out, he sees the undead soldiers kneeling in his presence. Wonders to himself, are they kneeling before him because he's a high-class necromancer has the ability to command the undead? Which I guess makes sense, right? Hops out the gate, summons Kaizel and tells him to fly as fast as he can. So back at Jinah school, the red orcs are absolutely cooking the green orcs. I mean, they're treating them the exact same way the green orcs were treating the students. Bro facepalmed 2 green orcs at the same time and smashed their faces into the pavement. And the students are staring in amazement. They have absolutely no idea of what's going on. Think about it, from their perspective, they were getting attacked by one orc, and then a whole different color orc came and attacked those orcs. So they're just like, are we next? So Jinah's a little bit familiar with Jinwoo's shadows, and she starts to wonder, is he around? The green orc population is starting to thin out a little bit, and just as she starts to get comfortable with her new security, one of the red orcs pushes her back because something's wrong. Suddenly the building starts shaking and you hear stomps coming from around the way. Back at the side of the portal, one final orc sitting on a throne made its way through, and this changed the entire energy of the building. The chief of the green orcs had finally arrived, and he said, I am Groktar, chief of the Red Blade tribe, and now nothing can stop me. He ushers a war call that rallies the remaining green orcs and says it's time to slaughter the rest of the humans. Now when he comes across Jinah's shadow guards, he is a little bit surprised that his ops are also orcs. He also noticed that like himself, the red orcs had a lot of tattoos, and these tattoos symbolize victory in battle, which means these are pretty accomplished warriors. And while saying that, he began to thrash the red orcs left to right. The tides of the battle had completely shifted as the red orcs were no match for Groktar. However, the red orcs continued to materialize no matter how much he slashed and thrashed them. And Groktar started putting 2 and 2 together. These aren't regular orcs. There's some wizardry going on here. And then all of a sudden he started getting that alert from the system that all monsters get. Kill the humans. And the more he fought, the louder this message or signal in his brain became. And then eventually he realized that these orc soldiers in front of him were being controlled by some sort of spell, which means all he needs to do is get rid of the sorcerer or the source of the spell. So he commanded his tribe to focus their attacks on restricting the movement of the red orcs so that he can try to find a way to deal with the source of their power. And if you remember back to last chapter, Manhwa was emanating out of Jinah, so he assumes that she's the sorcerer controlling these soldiers. And eventually he makes his way to her, lifts her off the ground by her throat, and says, so it was you all along. And of course she's struggling to respond because he's restricting her airways with his big ass green hands. But then out of nowhere something happened. Groktar froze stone cold in the same spot he was standing. A bad feeling struck through his body from head to toe, and he said to his soldiers, something is headed this way, something with a massive presence, something with a devious aura. And without a shred of warrior shame in the world, he turns to his tribe and says, y'all, we gotta run right now, everyone retreat. But by then it was too late, because Sung Jinwoo and Isul had crash landed through the roof of the building. And from Sung Jinwoo's body you see a dark aura emanating that we have never seen before. Groktar, still frightened, worked the nerve up to introduce himself as the chief of the Red Blade tribe. But before he could finish getting the words out his mouth, Sung Jinwoo turned and pointed at him saying, don't speak, which in English translates to shut your bitch ass up and wait for me there. He immediately goes to check on his sister, embraces her and tells her, hey, you're safe now, I'm sorry I'm late but I'm here. And slowly you start to see his shadow army materialize around him as he gives them the order to take the students downstairs and outside the building to safety. And the green orcs, who are at this point completely mortified, start taking a few steps back. And Sung Jinwoo was like, I thought I told y'all don't move, and directed his aura at them. Groktar works up the nerve to speak again. He said, so I see those immortal soldiers were yours. Who are you and how do you know our language? He tells Igris specifically to watch over Jinah. Despite completely ignoring their questions, they now have Sung Jinwoo's full attention. I think Groktar is low-key offended by being ignored by a human because he's like, alright, if you don't want to talk, everybody attack. I'm gonna let y'all know right now, this was by far the second dumbest thing he's done today. The first dumbest thing was putting his hands on Jinah. First wave of orcs launched themselves at a still motionless and silent Sung Jinwoo. First one he grabs by the wrist and slams him on the ground back and forth the same way the Incredible Hulk did Loki in the Avengers movie. The other two he uses telepathy to raise off the ground and smash them together, but it gets devious. He continues smashing harder and harder until their two bodies are mashed together in ball form. The whole time Sung Jinwoo still hasn't uttered a single word. Seeing a mere human do this to their brothers enraged the rest of the green orcs. Next wave sprung into action 5, 6, 7 at a time. Out of nowhere you just see chunks of bodies missing, arms being torn from their shoulders, heads being ripped from their necks. Green orcs were getting shredded piece by piece, literally. The craziest thing about it, Sung Jinwoo was doing this with his bare hands. No shadows, no weapons, just vibes. The high school gymnasium had turned into a complete and utter bloodbath. Now there's only one thing left to do, and that's take out their leader. What looked like a flash step, he appeared in front of Groktar, grabbed him by the neck and pinned him against the wall. Pause. Immediately began questioning him. Why? Why are y'all so hell-bent on killing humans? Groktar gives him the exact same answer that every other monster he defeats gives him. Voice in his head commands him to do so, and it gets louder and louder when he doesn't. Voice in his head drives him to kill humans. Sung Jinwoo asks him what probably is going to be the coldest line in season 3 of the anime. Do you hear the voice when you look at me? Insinuating that Sung Jinwoo is no longer human. Immediately Groktar begins pleading, begging for his life. Forgive me, please. Sung Jinwoo actually says, oh, don't worry, I forgive you. Don't get it twisted. That doesn't mean I'm not gonna let you off easy. I'm gonna take my time with your ass. Point of view switches back to the Knights Guild in the A-rank gate, and boy are they having a time. While Beru and the ants are doing the lion's share of the work, they are also a little bit hard to manage. Mainly because they're prone to eating everything, which kinda gets in the way of them mining loot. The A-rank healer is trying to pull a vampire's carcass out of the ant's mouth. And of course, these ants aren't sentient beings like a lot of Sung Jinwoo's other shadows, so it did what an ant would do and attacked the girl. Now, Beru saw this, and with the wave of a hand, he made the ant back off. And on top of that, he was even kind enough to heal the A-rank healer. And this is technically his way of debuting the fact that he still has means ability to heal people. Because if you remember from the Jeju Island raid, he bit his head off. Which is why when they're walking away, the A-rank healer mentions the fact that he's able to heal better than she is, which is because he absorbed the abilities of an S-rank healer. Now they open the doors to the throne room, and what they find is this figure. And while shaking in their boots, the Knights Guild's hunters tell us that this is a dungeon boss named the Arc Lich. Arc Lich? One of those, I don't know. And along with him, he has 10 Death Knights as well. Now, Dong-soo gives us the history of the Arch Lich. The Guildmaster tells us that there are many notable dungeon bosses, but the Arch Lich rose to infamy after the annihilation of the Gold Dragon Guild incident. And apparently the first one ever encountered wiped out a major Chinese guild and caused a dungeon break. And this would have been completely catastrophic, kind of similar to what happened to America with the dragon, if he wasn't stopped by Lu Zhizhang. And then he adds, nonetheless, a strike squad consisting of A-rank hunters is not enough to take on a threat of this magnitude. And to make matters worse, a horde of the undead who avoided being eaten by the ants are now blocking their exit. Now just as they can make it through the doors, one of the A-rank hunters placed a shield that will only last for 5 minutes. So at this point they're starting to panic, they're all out of options, back to the wall, and Sung Jinwoo was not there to save their ass. And then all of a sudden the Archlich begins to speak. He says, "You are an army of shadows. Why is the king's personal army here to attack us?" And when I tell you, this is the moment where I fell in love with Shadow Beru. Bro simply laughed, literally kiki, pointed back at the Archlich and said, "We were chosen by the king, and you were not." And the Archlich replies, "Impossible. I shall speak to the king myself." But before he could even finish his sentence, Beru was already in his face and launched an attack that at first looked like was going to be a regular punch until you realize his hand is in his chest. And he gets in close and whispers, "You sure have a lot to say for someone who's about to die." And when I tell you Beru be aura farming as much as Sung Jinwoo, bro ripped his heart clean out of his chest. Not only killed the Archlich instantly, all the surrounding undead soldiers as well. He even took the time to crush the heart in his hand just to let us know he him. This whole encounter left the Knights Guild completely dumbfounded. He annihilated an Archlich with a single punch? Now all the undead are out cold as well. And it was almost as if Beru knew they were talking about him because he let out this loud ass victory scream, shaking the entire dungeon and letting everybody know he him again. Jong-soo's assistant began marveling at the fact that with soldiers like that, Sung Jinwoo probably doesn't even need to set foot in the gate to clear it. All he has to do is summon his shadows and send them through. Jong-soo starts wondering to himself if he can summon all his beasts at the same time without depleting his mana. However, even if he can't, just a few of them are probably strong enough to rival the strongest of guilds. The assistant then said, "Come on boss, we don't have time, we have to hurry up and acquire Sung Jinwoo's guild." And Jong-soo said, "Acquire? That doesn't sound right. Let's call it an alliance instead." The assistant started stuttering. He's like, I was really just joking. It doesn't really look like Sung Jinwoo needs our help." But Jong-soo sees an opportunity. He said, "Don't be ridiculous. The rules won't be bent just because he's Sung Jinwoo. Although he can clear a gate on his own, his shadows do not count as hunters. In order to raid gates legally, you have to have a minimum amount of hunters." The Knights Guild were able to form an official alliance with the Ahjin Guild. They would supply the hunters and Sung Jinwoo would supply the firepower. The assistant was like, "Hey, so basically you're trying to let Sung Jinwoo carry us." Jong-soo was like, "Nah, I wouldn't say carry. It's more like just, having the right connections for the job." The point of view then switched to Sung Jinwoo and Mr. Go debriefing the situation that happened at Jinah school. Apparently there were a lot that didn't make it out, but also there were a lot that did thanks to Sung Jinwoo. Mr. Go Gun-hee then changes the subject to something really interesting. Apparently all the other major nations have been reaching out to him to get in contact with Sung Jinwoo. Representatives from Japan, the United States, Russia, France, the UK, Germany. While he says he's here to support whatever decision he makes, he'd also like to throw an offer in the ring. He offered to do anything in his power and provide him with any resources he'll need if that means he'll stay with Korea. Because on the world stage, without Sung Jinwoo, they're pretty weak compared to other countries. And Jinwoo don't waste no time. He said immediately, "I'd like to enter high-ranking gates alone from now on." Can you make that happen? Can you bend the rules that stipulate there has to be a minimum amount of hunters to enter a gate? Gung-Go-hee explains that law was put into place for the safety of hunters. Prevents them from haphazardly walking into dungeons and getting themselves killed. And in his head he thought to himself, bro really trying to be a one-man strike squad. Then as it's gonna be something that's tough to do, but it's not impossible. Ends the conversation by saying, "Leave it to me." Point of view switches to a woman named Soo-yoon who appears to be some form of celebrity. She receives a call from none other than Jinho himself asking if she wants to be a founding member of his new guild. Explains that in order to be a legitimate guild they need one extra person and she wouldn't actually have to do any work. It's a much better alternative than being an ambassador for his father's guild. At first she's a little bit skeptical. Why is he calling her about a guild all of a sudden that only has 2 members, and who's the founding member of this guild? She thinks he's being scammed by some shady person that sold him a dream of being the head of his own guild. He also asks if he's aware that his sister Jin-hee is going to come back to town pretty soon. But she replies, "Yes, of course I'm aware that's my sister, but that's not important right now. You'll be shocked to hear who this shady guy is." And she says, "Who is it?" The point of view then switches to Sung Jinwoo, who just made it back to the office and is now being introduced to the new member of his guild. Jinho says, "This is my cousin Yo Sun-hyun and she is a certified A-rank hunter. She's also a local celebrity who has agreed to be our 3rd member." Sung Jinwoo is pretty much like, "I guess," and the last thing she asks before the point of view switches is, "Do you mind taking a selfie with me that she can post on social media?" At the Korean Federal Building, Go Gun-hee is pleading Sung Jinwoo's case and he's having a hard time at that. The senator behind me is going to town on Go Gun-hee for proposing a regulation that stipulates that shadow soldiers count as hunters, fulfill the requirements necessary to raid gates. It says if this isn't preferential treatment, then I don't know what is. The Hunters Association exists for the good of all hunters, not just Sung Jinwoo's. So please explain yourself, Mr. Go. Gogun, he says, it's simple. It's exactly what you just said. This is preferential treatment. And he puts everybody in that room on the spot. He says, I would like to ask everyone gathered here today a question. If you had the option of a strike squad consisting of 20 A-rank hunters or a strike squad consisting of just Sung Jinwoo himself, you could only deploy one of those teams into a dungeon break scenario, which one would you choose? And without giving them a single second to answer, he goes to his next point. Senator Nam, I heard you recently moved to a new apartment building near the Hunters Guild. What was your reason for moving to that neighborhood? The housing prices are so much higher in the surrounding areas. Could it be that it was for your own safety? Do realize that everybody in the country wishes they could move somewhere safer. And Korea will not be safe for very long without Sung Jinwoo. And also, you realize every single country in the world is desperate to get their hands on Sung Jinwoo. Do you really think he'll want to remain here in Korea if we're unwilling to compromise with him? What I'm really asking is, are you prepared to make the same mistake a second time? Because this is starting to feel just like that time our other top S-rank hunter Hwang Dong-soo left us for America. You feel like this type of preferential treatment feels unreasonable? I plead with you. Who's gonna save your life next time there's a big ass S-rank dungeon break? Who's gonna save your life next time we have a Jeju Island situation on our hands? Point of view this time switches to Cha Hae-in. All you see is her trembling, sweating, shaking, and it's one of those I can't tell if she's anxious or pissed off. What I do know is, in her hand is her phone, and on her phone screen is an Instagram photo posted by Soo Yoon. And that photo is of her standing next to Sung Jinwoo, and the caption reads, "My first day at the Ahjin Guild."